Are you ready to branch out, to take a leap of faith, to love yourself and others fully? Then let go of whatever no longer serves you to take action now on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Erica will energize and excite you to power up your passionate dream that sets your soul on fire. With Erica's E3 approach, equipping, empowering, and enlightening yourself so you can be yourself for yourself. Get ready and get rooted to live a life without regrets, without what ifs, without should haves, and especially without empty feelings from a life unexplored. This hit show helps you build powerful and intentional roots to live it up, love it up, and let it go. Get fearlessly ready and powerfully rooted in your yes with your host, Erica Gifford Mills, and be fearless about your more and stand in your yes. Now on Get Rooted Radio.
Welcome, everyone. I am Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. A big shout out to my new producer, Edvin. Hey, Edvin, how was your weekend?
Pretty good. I had some fun and came back on Monday excited to work with you. So here we are.
Well, see, thank you. That is so sweet. I had a great weekend as well. It was the birthday celebration weekend at the village I live in. And I always joke because it normally falls right around my birthday. And this weekend it did. And I always joke, they throw me a birthday party. Like you would think I was born here and I wasn't. But my birthday had me thinking of my parents, both of them whom have passed. And I've had so many fond memories. And I think it's because of our family and the way that I was raised. I am the youngest. I have 7 older sisters and 1 older brother. And many of us were tomboys. I mean, we were in the dirt, climbing the trees with my dad, running around, knocking each other over, hitting each other, and all sorts of things. My mom would constantly say, be a lady. And my dad would walk past and say, sure, be a lady, have good manners, but don't be a pushover. Don't just be a lady, be a legend. And that always stuck with me, right? And he always told us we could do anything we wanted to be and don't fall under the old adage of children should be seen, not heard. And that's what really brings me to our guest. And I met her a couple of weeks ago during a women's conference, and it was my pleasure to meet her. And I want to tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to just jump right in because her presentation during the conference was enlightening and enlifting, and I think it's something that you listeners are going to want to hear. So Cara Tuttle Bell has served as a director of the Project Safe Center since its founding in 2014. Cara previously served as the Associate Director for Student Accountability, Community Standards, and Academic Integrity at Vanderbilt University, and as the Director of Programs for the Women's Center at Northwestern University. Cara holds a JD from Vanderbilt University Law School, a Master's of Art in Women's and Gender Studies from the University of Louisville, and her Bachelor of Science in Political Science from Ball State University. Cara serves as a senior lecturer in College of Arts and Science within the Department for Gender and Sexuality Studies, for which she regularly teaches a seminar on gender and violence. She is a frequent speaker and occasional author, and she has just released her first book, Drowning in Timidity, Women, Politeness, and the Power of Assertive Living. So please welcome Cara Tuttle Bell. Thank you so much, Cara, for being here with me today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you.
So tell listeners how you got into this important line of work. What drove you to write this book and drives you each and every day?
Well, growing up, I was a tomboy, so I appreciate, that reminder. And then something happens to many of us, not all of us, but where we do learn to maybe rein it in a bit, become more ladylike. And certainly as I've been in the professional workspace, I try to be polite and professional in all settings. But at some point, like many women, it felt like I wasn't living my authentic self. And you can't in every job, right? And it's a journey. But I came into this job as the director of Project Safe back in 2014, and it's the pinnacle of my career. And it's tough work, it's challenging, but it's rewarding. But I really had to just bring it all to the surface, right? And use my full skill set if I were going to do this successfully. And now I just celebrated my 9th year of my work anniversary here, which, you know, it's always like, where did the time go? But I'm so proud of what we built. And so what my job is asking me to do is address sexual harassment and sexual assault in the campus environment, and help students, faculty, and staff feel safer and be safer. And sometimes those are easy conversations and sometimes they're not, but it is definitely a cause worth pursuing. And so I've had to live all of the things that I read about or believed in about engaging us assertively, clearly, and try to strike the balance too, because it's easy to be heartbroken or bitter in jobs like this when you're encountering trauma and hurt and harm day in and day out. And so I really, for myself, was trying to find that balance that assertiveness gives me between feeling frustrated and not communicating what I think was needed, or being too aggressive too often, and then not being persuasive in the role. And so I was reading about it and researching, and you know, I have some great friends, and some of them pointed out that, you know, many young women come to you for this, you know, and the role also asked me to do so much public speaking that I then just kept getting invited to do more. And so I've really now settled into, okay, people are asking me to talk about this. They're feeling like this must be a balance that I'm striking right at least some of the time. And after so long, when people were saying, when are you going to write your book? I finally sat down and did it.
And it is a great book. And I really encourage people to go out and get it. And we'll tell you how you can get a copy and everything a little bit later. But in your role, I mean, and I can only imagine how it would be frustrating and really wanting to be assertive and not aggressive, because a lot of times the aggressive shuts people down, right? Whether it's either side. And so how in that role, right, when you have people and you're trying to have a conversation, which those are tough conversations. I think a lot of the conversations that we are having now are tough. They're long overdue. They're very much needed. But how does it get into the seen and not heard in the very early parts of our lives? You know, is it about the way we raise our children, especially girls, and how we raise boys to treat them, and vice versa? How does that all come into play?
I think it still very much does. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm in my 40s, and there are a lot of gains that we benefited from. There are a lot of things that seem like we've addressed it, and you can see spaces where there's equality and equity, but I also see plenty of spaces where there's work left to do. And so we might not use the same phrases anymore. So when I talk to college students, no one is telling them things like men are the gas and women are the brakes. But that's definitely something I heard my grandmother say. But I'll tell you, they're bringing some of the same ideas in, even though they've learned to talk about them in less gendered ways, right? So the behaviors haven't changed as much as our idea to espouse equality and progress, maybe a little bit more than we actually have. So I continue to see it. And when I was an adolescent and when I was a young law student, I thought we were past it, you know, and I was like, I'm going to be bold and I'm going to be successful, and we've accomplished all of these things. But then you get in your first few jobs and it's very traditional. And with the college students now, I help them think about, like, who is hiring you? Who are you working for? And so you see that change is really incremental, and that we're carrying a lot of ideas from our parents' generation and how we were raised into, whether it's the educational environment or in the workplace, that seems so rooted in this. Look around at any meeting, a conference, church gathering, community picnic, look around and watch the gendered norms play out, right? So unfortunately, they're still really entrenched. And what tends to happen is that we condone in very small children the divide very early on. What are boys allowed to get away with in certain settings? Like what kind of behavior, and what can we expect from young women, right? So we continue to perpetuate these gender norms in all kinds of ways, from the clothes we dress them in, whose clothes are comfortable, whose clothes are constraining, right? And what image are we portraying, and who looks like a kid and whose clothes are grown, right? Or even getting sexy at such an early age. And so we do teach women to be pleasant and polite, and to take care of things, and to take care of others, and to either
The smile.
The smile. Oh my gosh, smiling. And it still happens. If I go through airport security, someone will always, and it's a nice older gentleman usually who's like, smile. And I know they, don't mean anything by it, but we're still reinforcing it over and over, from women, at our age and older, to children as young as 2, 4, and 5.
Right. And I think that is important. I mean, I'm guilty of it when, if somebody called me, oh, sweetheart, I'd be like, I beg your pardon. But if it's an older gentleman who is, of that generation, I kind of let it go, right? Because I'm like, okay, I know he's not being condescending. At least I hope he's not being condescending. But if somebody said that to me in the workplace, or out in public, and I probably wouldn't be assertive. I'd probably be aggressive.
Well, right. Sometimes we are. It's about finding that balance, right? You do have to choose your battles.
Right. So, we're going to take a quick break, because I think it does start at an early age, and watching how we're doing it, even through our actions, inactions, our words, how you're dressing your kids, how you're showing up for them, and how you having them show up for themselves. But we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about embracing assertiveness. But before we do, Cara, tell listeners, how can they learn more about you, and get a copy of your new book?
Thank you. So you can find as much information as you want to know about me at caratuttlebell.com, or at drowningintimidity.com. Drowning in Timidity is the title of the book, and you can purchase it directly right from the website.
Wonderful. And that's all online. So listeners, if you didn't catch it or wondering about the spelling, all that information is right on the Transformation Talk Radio, Get Rooted Radio page. So please go out and take a look at that. You are listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any portion of today's episode, you can catch it on getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com. Don't forget to subscribe online to receive the latest news, events, and specials, especially those words of encouragement. Go to getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Cara Tuttle Bell. Thanks for being with us today, Cara.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So during our last segment, we talked about how we raise our children, especially girls, really has a major impact to future actions. I mean, it seems pretty self-explanatory, but it is the words in our actions and our inactions that shows them how they are, quote unquote, supposed to act. And I think when we start opening that up to, there is no necessarily one way to act, we will see many changes. So how do we start truly teaching assertiveness and embracing it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would like for it to start much earlier. So again, I work with college students, and I love working with college students, but I'm getting a bunch of 18-year-olds mostly. And so at that time, I'm already trying to undo some of these lessons. Not about good behavior. I love good behavior. We love, it's not about not having good manners, but it's just about being able to tap into assertiveness when you need it. And so we've clearly gone too far, because I regularly hear from student after student, that they don't know how to articulate their boundaries. So, I think it can start as early as kindergarten, if not sooner. And you're not going to have the same conversation with them about assertiveness and passive aggressiveness. You're not going to use these words with them, but you're going to talk to them about boundaries, and they're entitled to safety and fairness and taking turns and contributing, right, to whatever the work is or whatever the task is. So we have to stop assuming that some people will do chores or certain types of chores and not others, because we get used to the same patterns. We get used to women providing service or doing the emotional labor, and we gender toys. I mean, you can walk into any store and see the pink and blue, which is very handy for shopping quickly, but is entrenching these expectations of who will do what. It's not about keeping people from doing what they want to do in life. It's about them actually finding their calling and doing what they want to do and feeling able to do that. And also about being treated well and establishing those rules and boundaries and expectations for yourself that you can measure against, right? So we're developing some warning signs of getting into unhealthy relationships, and that you communicate to others. So communication is really key. We have to talk about respectful interactions, about touching one another. We can't wait until they're 18, because what's happening is they go on in life, whether that's to college or not. But generation after generation is learning these things about human interaction and relationships the hard way. And I think we really can do better. And I think assertiveness is the key.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's when you go in there and go give your aunt a hug, go give your uncle a hug, and your child says, I don't want to. And yet they're like, oh, come on, give me a hug, or you're encouraging them. Start then. If they don't want to, they don't have to be disrespectful and say, oh, get away, no, because you smell.
Right.
It's, no, thank you, right? You can encourage the manners, as you said, the politeness and the respect, but also allowing them to set those boundaries. And it starts at a young age.
Yes, and people shy away from talking about the kind of work that I do, but what I see are other people's children, right? Who our traffic is in our center is other people's children. And they're telling us things that they tell us they haven't told their parents. And it is about people who made them uncomfortable when they were young, family members who didn't respect their boundaries in some way. So those hugs, even that seems harmless in the moment, those hugs can be really heavy experiences that the child carries on. And so a lot of what we end up doing at centers like mine is not just responding to things that happen to them on Saturday night, but supporting them through acknowledging what happened to them in childhood. And a lot of it that we see, even though we try to help them feel better about it, is some self-blame. It's some victim self-blame about why didn't I say anything or fight back. And my question to them is, who has ever taught you to do this? Probably no one.
Yes, and it is more than fighting, well, self-defense, of course. I mean, fighting back, and it seems like we teach that more often now. But what about with your words, right? And teaching that at a early age. We talk about stranger danger, but it's, as we all know, a lot of these events aren't from strangers. And it's, how do you open those lines of communication and learn in advance on what we can say, what we need to say, and how do we start, right? And I think one of your points you had said is start small and just keep building on it. And as it gets age appropriate, add on to it, right? And keep going. And I think it's the conversation. We were talking at break, us and Edvin, about if we don't state our wants, needs, desires, how is anybody going to know? They're not in our head. So if we don't speak up, we do need to take responsibility for that.
We've romanticized the notion of the partner who can read your mind, and that would be great. I mean, that would be wonderful. But isn't it lovely when we have someone in our life who wants to love us the way we want to be loved and meet our needs and wants? But I don't know how you get there without communicating it. So it's definitely work worth doing, even though it doesn't feel natural if you haven't practiced.
And it takes practice, right? You need to continue. So as your kids are growing, you need to reinforce that. And then as you get older, as the one's child, right, you need to keep practicing it. I mean, there are times where you might have a new employer, you might have a new manager, and you're trying to be polite, be nice, and you don't want to disagree with them. And then it comes to a point where you just can't hold it in anymore. And you're like, yeah, no. And then, I should have been practicing this all along. Right. How can I go about and back and say that? And I think, do you have some examples where people can practice this?
Sure. Similarly, a lot of women do seek out some assertiveness training or guides or quick tips when they want to negotiate their salary. And I'll help you do that. And there are great books on this. But it is like anything else, that if you're trying to cram the night before, you're not going to get the best result if you had been studying all along or practicing all along. And so it's hard. It's harder to start than it is to stop once you get going. Okay, it's harder to start. So you just are going to dip your toe in the water, and you're going to voice one thing today, one thing in the next 24 hours. And it can be a want, or it can be a need, but you can ask your partner, you can ask the clerk at the grocery store, it doesn't matter, but you're going to ask for something. So if, say, you go into the grocery store and you see that there is like this wonderful vegetable tray, and it will serve your purposes, but we're at the sell by date, you can actually ask if they can reduce the cost. It's low stakes. You're not going to lose anything. What kind of discount? You're going to get 10 cents. It's not about the vegetables and what you pay for the vegetables. For here, it is free assertiveness training practice. You're going to ask for something. Or next time you stay at a hotel or motel, right? You can ask for something. Some people ask for lots of things, right? But say you have maybe there's one robe in the room and the person with you would also like a robe. Pick up the phone, call the front desk, and ask for another robe. Do you need another robe? Not really, right? That's a nice perk sometimes that you pleasantly surprised if that's in the room and you can just sit around and pretend you're at the spa. The point is, I want you to practice first with baby steps that are low to no stakes, right? Because we have to get the words out before we practice in a higher stakes setting. Everybody thinks they can just turn on really great salary negotiation skills, maybe once every 3 to 5 years. This is not the way to do it, right? Because you actually need to advocate for yourself at work, at home, daily, really daily. I think we forget that. We're just trying to survive sometimes, but daily practice is really the key, because then at night, I can go to bed knowing I did my best. I tried, not holding on to, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I'd done this. I know I tried. So strangely, assertiveness can give you a lot of peace.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Exactly.
And I talked about that in one of the previous podcasts about, I said that to my son at an early age, and I was very glad I did until he kept using it on me. But it's true. If you don't ask, answer will always be no. So in some situations, what do you have to lose? And others, what do you have to gain? You have so much. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so important. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss collective assertiveness. But before we go, tell listeners again how they can learn more about you and get a copy of your new book.
Thank you. The new book is Drowning in Timidity, Women, Politeness, and the Power of Assertive Living. And you can buy the book direct from my website at drowningintimidity.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I am Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Don't forget to visit getrootedradio.com to listen to a replay of this episode, sign up for helpful tips, and learn about upcoming events. That's getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Cara Tuttle Bell. Thanks again for being with us today, Cara.
Glad to be here.
So I like to continue on with this example of the salary negotiations, because as you said in the last segment, in case you missed it, it was start small and ask for things that I don't say aren't important to you, but that there's no great loss in it, right? Ask for a discount if you see something at the grocery store. Ask for the robe when you're at the hotel for an extra one. Ask for things every day so that you can get used to that. And that's important because, as you said, you're not going to get what you want or get what you need if you never open your mouth.
Right. So we want to build up to being strategic with it. And that feels daunting at first. So I like asking for unimportant things. I mean, that's the point, right? That you're trying to identify from people you don't know and don't have to see again. So it feels really low stakes. I think that's really key. And that's why when women have to negotiate their salary, it's always like, oh, deep breath and this like groaning. I'm like, oh, I know I need to do it. And I'm getting the message that I need to do it, but I don't feel ready to do it. And again, I would say to them, well, of course you're not. We're not teaching these skills. But what I found in researching for my book was that so many of the assertiveness manuals or workbooks that existed really just focused on the individual. And so what I was thinking that we needed, just living in a community, watching the world events play out over the past few years, is a sense of collective responsibility. And so that's where I'm hoping our understanding of assertiveness grows and really takes root.
Yes. I mean, it's like the show, What Would You Do? Right? Mm-hmm. If something horrible or unjust was happening around you, are you going to just let it happen? Are you going to ignore it? Are you going to step up and say something? And in certain situations, you might have to let it go, right? Are you physically in danger yourself? Is it something that you're putting yourself or maybe somebody you're with in danger? Or do we have that collective responsibility, especially with so many things going on in today's society, to step up, to lift each other up? And I think that is a great aspect to look at it. We do have that. If we want the world to be better, then we need to do something.
Right. We have to show up. We do a lot in sexual harassment and assault prevention around a training that's called Bystander Intervention training. But you can apply this to incivility, you can apply it to microaggressions of any type of discrimination. So I think it's really worth doing no matter what the cause is closest to your heart. But we've trained now several classes of high school and college students to engage in what is called bystander intervention. We want to shift from being a passive bystander seeing these things to an active bystander who's doing something about it. With always, though, the caveat that we want you to survey the scene and choose what's safe for you to do so. But I might need you to be a little bit brave or navigate discomfort. And that's where we were losing some people. So we were teaching bystander intervention techniques, and the techniques are easy by design. So lots of the people who were participating in these workshops and trainings were getting the concept, but what was missing? What's missing was the assertiveness of like putting it into action. So we could teach strategies, and there's, depending on the course, 3 to 5 Ds is what we call them. So you can confront a situation directly, you can create a distraction, you can delegate to someone better able or with more authority to respond, you can delay using any of those tactics or other tactics, and then sometimes just documenting is the best you can do. And now that we're carrying devices with us at all times, there are some good ways that change the world that we can use our capability to make photos and videos. And so we teach those strategies. And participant after participant is like, okay, easy enough. But when you come back and survey them and say, okay, did you do it? They say, oh, I wanted to, but I didn't feel ready. And so that's where my work life, and then my just general goals of empowering women and uplifting women, I saw this overlap here of the missing piece, which is some assertiveness training. And we tend to think of it as something you either have or you don't. And I don't believe that. I think it can be learned, and I think it can be taught.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and it might not feel natural. You've got to get comfy being uncomfy to really grow in any aspect of your life. And this is one of them, is speaking up for yourself, for somebody else, so that we can take that responsibility. So I know there was something that we were talking about, and we wanted to make sure that we got into the discussion, was the limits of philanthropy.
Oh, it's related to this. It
Yes.
is. And so, like bystander intervention, when we're asking participants, like, what do you think you'll do? The socially desirable answer is clearly, I'll confront the situation directly, but it is the strategy least used. So philanthropy is falling in there somewhere too, in that, like, we're not actually confronting the situation directly. We're doing very important work. I mean, I will take it. Please continue doing your philanthropy. Please hear me, and that I'm not trying to criticize philanthropic endeavors. But what they show, I think, is the gap in the system, right? They're reflecting gaps where needs are not being met and problems are not being solved, right? So I think the limits of philanthropy are that even at its best, it shows us that it's a patch on a broken system. So we need to do the uncomfortable in addition to the comfortable. It's easier to attend a nice event, a fancy event, and I enjoy it and I love it. I love to put on a dress and go to the fundraiser event. That's fun to do, but that's not grappling with the issue at, face to face, and making long-term or systemic change. And again, I think one of those takes assertiveness and one of them doesn't.
Yes.
Kind of like our social media activism. Some of it is worth doing and some of it propels change. And some of it is the least we can do. So is it easy to post a single picture on our Facebook or Instagram pages? That depends. That depends where you are. That depends who your friends and family are in your community. But if it feels easy to do, that's an indication to you that that is not the work on the cause, right? That can be the bare minimum. And I want us to aim so much higher.
Yeah, and I think it's the actions, right? It's, as you said, donate. Like if somebody, whether it's something as donating to your school's, bake-a-thon, but are you showing up too? Are you putting into an actual action? And again, if all you can do right now is that donation, we'll call the philanthropy of sorts, but it's what's the next step? So if you have to start there, great, but then like dip your toe into the water. And I love what you said, like, come on in, the water's warm, right? And I think that is so important. And it's getting to that next level. Just like if you were in a fitness class and you've got the routine down. All right, now let's add a little bit more weights. Let's make it a little harder, because then you're going to get better. You're going to grow. You're going to show others that this is the norm, right? It's no longer, I don't want to say it's no longer enough just to give, but it's no longer enough just to give. Right. We need to go to that next level. It's just like, with the racism that we have, it's with the problems that we have in our society, that we can't have a normal conversation. And you need to take that next step. Get comfy being uncomfy. Right.
I mean, that's where growth is. I love the exercise analogy, because it is. That's what assertiveness is. A muscle. It is a skill. You can learn it, then you flex it, then you flex it when you need it, right? And sometimes it's hard to turn off. So I need to dial it back sometimes now. I've gotten so used to doing it, where I'm like, do you need to be this assertive in this encounter? But get there. It's so much more comfortable place to live, right? Where I feel like I'm choosing how I show up, rather than I feel like meetings and decisions are happening to me, right? I feel like I'm a part of them. Yeah, I mean, talking about racism, I do talk about racism and the United States and 2020, some in the book, and tensions are high and divisions are severe. And I talk about the infamous social media posts, right? But it's like, you cannot post one thing once a year and call that allyship. You're not showing up for your people. And I saw friends and family members, right, who would protest things like many pandemic cancellations. And yes, I feel for kids in school, kids in college, university. I feel for all of us. We're missing things. We're missing things big and small. But if you can show up to protest things like the cancellation of a child's prom, then you have to understand the many issues that are prompting protests across the nation and the world. And we're pretending like we don't understand that. And if you have the assertiveness to do that, in your local school board, which please show up and participate in local government, school board, and all the way up. But we also need to respect the rights of others who are doing the same for causes near and dear to their heart and of matters of life and death.
Absolutely. And it is. And that's something that we're going to get into more, of course, but more about when is it acceptable to be angry? And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about how raising angry girls will change the world. And I think people might get confused, like, angry girls? Yes, angry girls. And we're going to talk more about that. Before we go, Cara, tell listeners how they can get a copy of your new book.
You can find my book on drowningintimidity.com. You can purchase direct from the website, and you can use the code GETROOTED for free shipping.
Wonderful. You heard that. Get Rooted for free shipping. Well, this is Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any of the information during the last segments, go to getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com to listen to the replay. Don't forget to subscribe, sign up for tips and special events and pricing for upcoming coaching sessions at getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Cara Tuttle Bell. Thanks for being with us today, Cara. Tell folks how they can reach you.
Find me on caratuttlebell.com. or on various forms of social media at Cara Tuttle Bell.
Wonderful. So before we went to break, I said we were going to talk about raising angry girls. And some listeners, you might be thinking, what? But explain what you mean, Cara.
I mean it. I mean it wholeheartedly. Sometimes when I get up and speak, and you've seen me, I say, I'm pissed off on a regular basis. Now, that's not very ladylike language, and usually I'm dressed, hopefully, in a professional or ladylike fashion. And so sometimes that causes a little, pause in the audience, but I do it deliberately because I think my anger is justified. My anger is justified because I work day in and day out addressing sexual harassment and sexual violence. Look around. There are so many causes so worthy of righteous indignation, if justifiable anger. Also, please keep in mind that I'm working with some of your children, right? I'm working with the children of people my age and older and younger, and hundreds of college students now over time. And they're talking to me about what has happened to them. I talk to ambitious, outgoing, confident extroverts, and I talk to those who don't know who they are yet and feel uncomfortable navigating intimate encounters, but also just making friends, right? So we see all different types of humans, and they are not in touch with their anger, not on the whole, right? Very few of them are. I mean, I love to see it because if they're coming to see me for matters related to my work, often it means that someone has violated their boundaries or insulted them in some way. And it could be strangers, right? Yelling from their vehicle as they walk down the street. It could be friends and colleagues. It could be teachers. It could be pastors. We see all sorts of things. Their anger makes sense to me because no one should be treating them this way. And this holds true across any type of discrimination, whether it is gender-based or sexual harassment, racism, ableism, ethnocentrism. So it makes sense. But when people are not in touch with their anger, it tends to take them a while to acknowledge what has happened to them, connect with a resource, be able to share what has happened to them with friends and family, and figure out really how to cope with it, whether it is ongoing or a one-time event. And what I want to get to is a phase of work or a world in which fewer people are telling me I didn't know what to say and I didn't know what to do. I want the outrage. I want the entitlement to bodily autonomy and dignity and respect, right? I don't want us to have to work so hard to find it after these things have happened to us, right? Which is true for so many of us, right? There's so many women's workshops and conversations and conferences and in books on unlearning and undoing. There's so many of us who find us in very much needed and highly valued therapy and other types of treatment designed to teach us to get back in tune with our bodies. I want young girls to be angry and allowed to be angry so they can stay in tune with their bodies and that they can keep intact their boundaries.
So well said. And I think that it's great that we have the tools to teach and to unlearn, but getting to a point where we don't need that because we're teaching it from the beginning, right? We're empowering the young girls to speak their minds, to, as you said, be outraged. There are times where it's necessary. It's just learning that, the balance between constantly being outraged and
Yes.
and having that entitlement, because there are so many things we are absolutely entitled to, not to get to the point of, everybody owes me everything. There's extremes out there, but
Sure.
it is and to be able to tap into that anger, and as you said, more quickly, right? To be able to say, oh no, like, okay, now you've crossed the line, and be able to stop with the victim blaming themselves, right? Because what could I have done? What should I have done? Did I do this wrong? And I think when we can get to that point, it will be a much more respectful, safe, dignified environment.
Yes. It won't prevent everything.
No.
And it's important to keep that in mind. And, I don't want anyone to think that either of us are trying to assign some responsibility for what happened to the person who was targeted or harmed. Absolutely not. But where there's room, right, to reduce the self-blame that some survivors feel, I want to do that. Where there's room to resist and set boundaries so that someone doesn't push them further, I want us to try to do that. And that's really the key, right? But we got to keep in mind that some of these harms will still occur, but I want to set better expectations, and I want us to aim higher. And I want that feeling to be present, to be on the surface, so that someone doesn't have to dig so deep to find their voice when they might need it most.
Oh, absolutely. And I think to further your point is that it's hoping to get to that point, but there are bad people out there, right? We can't change that. But how do we also make sure that, as a mother of a son, it's my responsibility to also teach him, how do you live in that situation? So it is about raising the angry girls, but raising the angry boys too, to say, if you hear this from your friends, from the locker room talk, whatever it might be, are you going to be outraged? Because that could be your sister, that could be your mother, that could be your aunt. Are you allowing that conversation? And it's like you said, the bystander is, are we training, poor choice of words, teaching our boys how to be that way too, and speak up and use their voices to ensure that we do have a safe, and it doesn't just happen to girls, right? It also happens to boys. And so making sure that people know that is, we want people to be angry about the disrespect, the outrageous activities that happen, whether that is sexual, discriminatory, whatever the situation might be.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the key right there, right? That bystander role and that sense of collective responsibility. That's what's going to change things. I need the boys, the men, to be outraged. Be outraged on our behalf, and be outraged in what you tolerate from each other.
Right.
That is so much more effective, because I will go around, listen, I'll go anywhere I'm invited and give my talk on prevention. But what's so much more powerful is for young men to say to each other, oh no, like that's not cool, or that we don't tolerate that here, or just no, man, or like, I think she's too drunk, whatever it is. Because I go home at the end of the day, I'm not living in a dorm, I'm not going to the parties, right? And we will do the work and we'll do all we can, but until we pick up this responsibility to care for each other and assert for one another, right, we're not going to get enduring change. We're not going to get systemic change. We're going to continue to see really high prevalence levels, regardless of the gender identity of the victim.
Absolutely. So definitely be heard and seen.
Mm-hmm.
Speak your truth, raise the voice, and get angry.
Get angry.
Yes. Thank you, Cara, so much for joining me today. Why don't you tell folks one more time how they can reach you and how they can get a copy of your book?
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Cara Tuttle Bell, and you can find information about me at caratuttlebell.com or on social media at Cara Tuttle Bell.
Wonderful. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to Get Rooted Radio. If you missed any portion of today's episode or want to listen again, go to getrootedradio.com for the podcast. And don't forget to tune in the first and third Monday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. And before I sign off, remember to ask yourself, am I living a rooted life? Am I thriving or just settling and surviving? If the answer is no, take time to think about what you need to do, then take action to make that answer a yes. One way to take action is to set up your free Empower Hour call with me, no charge, no obligations. Go to getrootedradio.com to find out how I can help you take action. And if you're ready to live, love, and let go, join me for my 12-week group coaching series, The Rooted Life. This series will assist you in achieving your goals, moving forward of letting go of those things that no longer serve you, leaning into love yourself and others fully, and live life to its fullest. Go to getrootedradio.com to learn more about this 12-week series and to get that free Empower Hour. Thank you again for tuning in. Have an amazing day, and I'm looking forward to the next time on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Visit getrootedradio.com if you've missed any part of this hit show, and tune in on transformationtalkradio.com to live fearlessly in your more and powerfully rooted in your unlimited yes. For more information and to work with Erica directly, visit getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com, and get ready to live it up, love it up, and let it go.